Andy is a 40-year-old man who leads a quiet and lonely life, which may even be common for some people. The problem is, he's hiding a very compromising secret. He's never been able to get it on with a woman. Being shy, awkward, and passionate about video games, our middle-aged protagonist gets into a real adventure when his coworkers decide to help him with his problem. But will Andy finally be able to get along with women? Check out the recap of The 40-Year-Old Virgin. The beginning. The film begins by introducing us to the day-to-day life of Andy, a middle-aged man who visibly doesn't fit the stereotype of guys his age. Being lonely and living a rather monotonous lifestyle, our protagonist is already in his 40s and still hasn't managed to get along with women. While all his friends have their own cars and drive to work, Andy uses his bike to cycle to work every day. He works in the stockroom of an electronics store, and there he interacts with his colleague Cal, who, in the very first scenes, is already shown to be very different from the protagonist. His other colleagues are David, Paula, Jay, and Mudge. During work hours, Cal, David, and Jay talk about a card game they are arranging, and they think about inviting Andy because they are missing people for the next game. Even against the other guy's wishes, Jay invites the protagonist to the poker game, and he eventually accepts. Everything seems to go well during the game, but things get awkward when the guys ask the protagonist to tell some funny story he's had with women. After fumbling with words, Andy makes it clear that he's never been with a woman, and Jay vows to do everything he can to help his friend change his situation. The next day, the protagonist goes to work hoping that everyone has forgotten about his secret. However, one of his colleagues, who wasn't even there the night before, teases Andy, saying it's time for him to have his first time. Angry, he runs out of the store and is pursued by David, who tries to calm him down. The two go to a cafeteria, where the main character explains why he has never been with a woman. David invites Andy to go along with him and the other guys to the next party, and that night the protagonist ends up dreaming about all the bad experiences he's had with women in his life. Back in business. Andy confronts his fears and decides to hang out with his work colleagues, and they all go to a club. Even though he's totally clumsy and doesn't really know how to socialize with people, he ends up getting along with Nikki, who invites him to her house. Since Andy can't drive, Nikki offers to drive him in her car. The problem is that she has been drinking all night, so the two of them go around driving in the streets like maniacs. And all the protagonist's expectations of getting lucky that night go down the drain when Nikki loses control of the car and ends up having to abruptly stop. When she finally manages to park the vehicle, the girl ends up vomiting on her clothes and even on Andy's face. The next day, after causing a few laughs at work by talking about what had happened the night before, Andy meets Trish, who is looking for some equipment for her shop. Everyone seems to shy away from her, and then Andy is forced to attend to her. The conversation, which begins in a professional manner, ends with Trish inviting the protagonist to visit her shop whenever he can. When he realizes that his friend had gotten the girl's number, Jay tells the other classmates, and they all decide to go out to celebrate. Second chance. As they celebrated at the bar, everyone was trying to give some tips on how Andy could make the most of his second chance with a girl. The film progresses to the next expedient in the store, in which Jay says that the protagonist needs to take care of himself a little more, and suggests that he shave his chest to make a better impression on his would-be love interests. All the colleagues accompany the friend to a salon, where what looks like a torture session begins. While the friend writhes in pain on the stretcher, everyone else laughs and enjoys the situation. The next day, Cal shares his experiences with his friend, saying that appearances aren't that important and that he'd rather secure himself with good conversation. After receiving some tips from his friend, Andy goes to a library, where he tries to put the techniques into practice. There, he approaches a girl named Beth, and the two talk for a while. The protagonist walks away confident that the girl liked him, which helps restore some of his self-esteem. At home, now more confident, Andy rehearses over and over what he might say to Trish on the phone. But when he finally gets the courage to talk to her, he gives up in the middle of the call. After work, the next day the group of friends go to a speed dating event. In short, it's a kind of real-life Tinder, where people go with the intention of finding potential partners. Andy talks to several girls, but they all just seem to reject him. Moment of truth. Right after, Jay's girlfriend shows up angrily at the store where everyone works, saying she had found the dating event card in her boyfriend's jacket. Without a second thought, the protagonist defends his friend and says that the card is actually his, and that Jay wasn't there. Meanwhile, David begins to act in a disturbed and problematic way, which makes the store manager decide to remove him from attending to the public. He is ordered to take the day off to rest, and Andy is chosen to replace him. To thank his friend for his help, Jay decides to throw a party at his house, since Andy has cleaned up his act with his wife. There, the protagonist realizes that his friends had hired a call girl and decides to get out of there as soon as possible. The next day, all of Andy's colleagues mock him, saying that the thing he lacks is the courage to change his situation, and then he decides to take action for the first time since the beginning of the film. Full of confidence, he walks to Trisha's store and asks her out. To his surprise, she accepts without much thought. The next day, the two talk on the phone and agree on their plans for the evening. Andy ends up having to tell her that he can't drive, so he wouldn't be able to pick her up. Trish, thankfully, doesn't seem to give much thought to this and offers to pick up the protagonist at his house. The two hit it off over dinner, and Andy manages to take the date to Trish's house, where it finally looks like he's going to get lucky. The girl goes to the bathroom to get ready, and the protagonist fumbles around while trying to understand how condoms work. But it all goes downhill once again when Trish's kids enter the room and end up finding Andy lying on the bed, littered with condoms everywhere. Embarrassed, he simply walks away, trying to fix things. Even with their awkward encounter, the two don't give up on each other, and Andy meets up with Trish again the next night. The girl apologizes for what happened, and Andy tries to find some way to say that he's never been with a woman before. But before he could think about how he was going to say that, Trish interrupts him, saying that they should wait until the 20th date to finally take things to the next level. Happy with the idea, Andy agrees to the proposal, since then he wouldn't have to tell her so soon that he has no experience in the matter. At work, the store manager, Paula, promotes Andy to sales manager and seems to sympathize with his colleague's situation. She even offers herself to solve his problem if he was willing to skip a few steps quicker. Countdown. As Andy and Trish continue to meet, we enter a sort of countdown to the 20th meeting, where supposedly the main character was going to solve his problem. In one of the conversations with Trish, the protagonist reveals his dream of having his own shop, and the girl suggests that he could sell his figurines to raise the necessary money. The next day, Trish asks Andy for help in dealing with her daughter, Marla, who is angry because she wants to start taking birth control pills. Trying to be helpful, the protagonist takes the girl to a clinic specialized in the subject. There, one of the doctors asks if there are any virgins in the room, and Marla raises her hand. Immediately, the other people look at her with a look of debauchery and disapproval, which causes Andy to also raise his hand, as if trying to make the girl feel a little better. As they drive home, Andy tries to tell Marla that he did it just to make her feel better, but the girl says she knows about his secret. However, she vows not to tell her mother about it. The next day, during his workday at the store, Jay gathers all his colleagues to show them the ultrasounds of his son, who is about to be born. To celebrate the fact that he is going to be a father and that he has managed to get his marriage back on track, he announces that he is going to throw a party at his apartment the next night. Andy, however, had other plans for that night. With Trish's help, he organizes one by one of the boxes of figurines he intends to sell, and he seems quite thrilled to be getting rid of the toys. It is visible that the figurines had great sentimental value to him. Suddenly, Trish interrupts her work with the boxes to remind the protagonist that this was their 20th meeting, and everyone knows what that means, don't they? The girl then goes for it, and things start to escalate quickly. But to Andy's despair, the girl ends up bumping into the boxes, knocking over some of the figurines. The main character goes into a fit of rage, fighting with the woman for not understanding the value the figurines have to him. After the argument, he leaves his house and goes straight to the party hosted by Jay, where he meets Beth, the girl he met a few days earlier at the library. Using the techniques he learned from his friends, he manages to get along with the girl, and in the blink of an eye he makes his way to her apartment. Trying to put his misunderstanding with Trish behind him, Andy also seems to be trying to put everything behind him once and for all. After all, he seems to be losing his patience. But while all this is going on, Trish gets sad because of their argument and leaves a message for Andy saying she's coming over to his apartment so they can make things right. Back at Beth's apartment, Andy realizes that the girl is too crazy for him, and he manages to get out of there as fast as possible, being scared away by what he was seeing. As it turns out, the girl was already much more experienced on the subject than he was, which made our friend quite nervous about the situation. His colleagues, who are also interested in the girl, tell the protagonist that it was not a good idea to cheat on his girlfriend, and that maybe he should get out of there. Without a second thought, Andy accepts the suggestion and decides to leave Beth to his friends. When he gets home, he finds Trish going through a collection of adult movies, which were left there by David. The protagonist had not even watched the movies, but the girl did not want to believe his excuses. Upset, Trish runs away and gets into her car. Determined not to give up his feelings for the girl, Andy decides to follow Trish on his bike, but he soon gets involved in an accident with a truck. Happy ending! Trish, noticing the accident, gets out of the car and tries to help the protagonist, who finally reveals that he still has no experience in bed. The protagonist says that is why he kept trying to prevent the couple from going further in their dates. Trish reacts very well to this, and the scene progresses to their wedding. After the ceremony, the couple heads to the hotel room where Andy is finally supposed to have his first time. There, they find an employee cleaning up the place, and the two quickly run him out of there. Now, with everything settled between them and the secret finally revealed, our protagonist is able to put an end to his drama. Today's recap comes to an end here, but before you go, we want to know if you had as much fun as us watching this comedy classic. Tell us in the comments which part of the movie you found the funniest, and if you have experienced something similar. Thank you so much for watching today's video, and until next time.